lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Late Night with the Devil, which was released March 22nd, 2024, exclusively in theaters, and will be released later this month on Shudder. But Rowan, I don't want to start with Late Night with the Devil. Fans of the show will know that last episode, I promised folks that our next review would be Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. So, what happened? Where's our review for Winnie the Pooh?
Yeah, we had to skip it. I was on my way, and unfortunately, there was a car accident on the way there. I got stuck in traffic for like 2 hours, hour and a half. So I had missed the time that it played, and unfortunately, which I think was very similar to the first one, this has like a very limited theater release where one theater in my entire province is playing it, and it plays it like once a day, and it was only doing that for like 3 days. I worked all the other days, and so yeah, I guess I'll have to wait, and I don't know, maybe I'll just be a shitbag, and I'll just like pick it for a full episode and make everyone else watch it.
Oh, I would not recommend that. Yeah, Rowan let me know probably about a half hour before the movie started, so I was already all geared up, ready to leave the house and go to the movie, and I was like, am I gonna go see Winnie the Pooh just because, for my own suffering or enjoyment? And I did. And I said, you know what? We don't need to do an episode on this. That's fine. I'm fine. I don't want to discuss it anymore. So we kind of looked at the schedule and we were like, you know what? Late Night with the Devil just happened to be playing in my theaters. It was the sort of thing where I looked earlier in the week and it wasn't listed for the weekend. And I think you mentioned it was playing near you, and I was like, man, that's so weird that we didn't get it. And hey, we did. So that's why we're doing this. And Rowan, I know you're a little older than I am, so obviously you remember what a staple late night television was before the proliferation of the internet. But did you watch anyone in particular? Were you a fan of late night? And based off of that, were you looking forward to Late Night with the Devil?
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I'm like a fan of late night television. I mean, obviously, like anyone else kind of, my age, I guess, it was prominent, especially like if you're a kid, you had like a shitty TV with bunny ears or something. Like, so you're like trying to watch TV in the middle of the night without your parents hearing, and one of the two channels you get is probably gonna have late night TV on it. Here's something for all my Canadian listeners: is I remember watching, which never gets mentioned, on Comedy Central. I don't know if they were called that, in the 90s, but they had a late show called it was like Late Night with Mike Bullard. It was like a guy from Toronto. I don't know, like a heavyset guy that was bald. I am assuming he was a comedian from Canada, but it was just like a real low budget ripoff of like Johnny Carson or Conan or any of that. But it was Canadian. He always had like Tom Green on, kind of like young heyday Tom Green. And so that was kind of like the late night show I identify most with. I'm more curious, you're a little younger than me.
Yeah.
Was late night shows a thing for you, or?
Yeah, so it's the thing, like, I kind of remember it in the early 2000s more so, or the mid 2000s. Like, I kind of have these memories of going upstairs, because, my room was in the basement, going upstairs and kind of like my mom and my aunts kind of having the late night shows on, like, some celeb sitting on a couch talking, promoting something. Or, there being like some sort of musical performance that, like, I don't know, MTV or someone was hyping up, like, oh, did you see the new Britney Spears performance or something? Or, there's probably a couple of times where bands I was interested in at the time, like maybe like a Linkin Park or something, was on one of those shows. So it was a sort of thing where oftentimes they would just be on in the background, and it would just be, I'd kind of pay attention every now and then if I happen to be upstairs and like not playing video games or like down on the family computer or something. But I was never like a huge fan of them, other than the Colbert Report, or Colbert Report, whatever. I used to watch it on Comedy Central back in probably like, I don't know, 2012, 2013. I really liked him. And then when he actually, changed to be a real like late night host, I didn't really like it as much just because it wasn't as funny, right? He was actually like being himself. So it was just kind of like, I liked the comedy stuff a little bit more. But yeah, no, I'm not a huge fan of late night either. I would say kind of what's replaced that for me is just podcasts completely, right?
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes I'll watch a podcast and it's literally just a bunch of guys sitting around like us with mics in front of them, or sometimes it's a little bit more commercial with like a studio or something and graphics and B-roll and stuff. But I just don't really see the point of watching a late night show nowadays. But Rowan, we've just been vamping about late night shows. Were you looking forward to this movie, or?
Ever since I kind of heard of it, I saw the trailer. I kind of heard like the rumblings about it, obviously on the internet, and people that are more in the know than me, or get access to all these kinds of people. Where we're saying there's this movie, it's coming, like. It might be the best thing that like Shudder's ever done, and that kind of had me hyped. I saw the trailer. I was like, "Yep, like this looks like my aesthetic, my whole shtick." So I was pretty pumped about this. What about you?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of in a similar vein where I've been hearing about this one for a while. I know it premiered at South by Southwest like a full year ago, essentially, but I think I even heard about it like earlier, like maybe in the trades, like Hollywood Reporter or someone might have reported on David Dastmalchian being like attached to this little, 70s horror movie that's like a late night thing or something. And I remember thinking at the time, like, that's sick because, David Dastmalchian, I mean, he just shows up in everything as like a great supporting actor, essentially. Like, he's always in something, I find, for like a couple of scenes, and then he's just gone from the movie most of the time. So I was just like, the guy has chops. I always think he's great pretty much in every movie he's a part of. So I was just really wanted to see him kind of take a lead role. And I mean, obviously this had a bunch of positive press coming out about it outside of the AI stuff, which we'll get into. That, I very much was looking forward to it. And I'm also a fan of the mockumentary style format. Like, I think we mentioned it when we were covering like The Medium recently, that I just love that style for like that format where they're trying to make you believe that something happened. I do think like some points in this movie, they kind of stray away from that. But like something like a Ghost Watch, which I don't know if you've seen, but I love that. And this is essentially like you could just tell that Ghost Watch inspired this for sure. That whole idea of, putting horror on mainstream live television for kind of like a nation to see and react to. And in Ghostwatch case, like believe that it was actually happening. That, this was completely my bag. I was looking forward to it for sure. So was this a late night show worth watching? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
Coming up, it's television's spookiest night in a special Halloween edition of Night Owls with Jack Delroy. Tonight, medium and psychic Christu demonstrates how he speaks to the dead.
You hear these voices of the dead all the time. I guess the burning question is, how the hell do you get any sleep?
Hypnotist Carmichael Haig puts the audience and yours truly in a spine-chilling trance. Then parapsychologist June Ross Mitchell introduces us to Lily, the subject of her book, Conversations with the Devil. Don't miss the television event of the year, tonight on Night Owls with Jack Delroy.
What you just heard is from Late Night with the Devil, written and directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns. And the story is as follows. A live television broadcast in 1977 goes horribly wrong when a late-night program unleashes evil into living rooms across the nation. Now, here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Late Night with the Devil?
Well, I'm going to make sure I say this up front. Can we just give David Dastmalchian, more movies as him as a leading man? He's fantastic in this. Like you said, he's great in everything he's been in. I feel like the last year or so, it's just been we're in the time of David Dastmalchian. He's in anything and everything that could possibly be released in the theater.
He's in like a little horror indie for 2 scenes. He's in, the huge blockbuster to get blown up. He's in, I mean, I haven't seen him in any rom-coms or anything, but I wouldn't be shocked, for him to just wander in as like the weird date she went on one time. Yeah, the dude's great. He needs more leading roles for sure.
Yeah, like he's fantastic, and really, like, if you're on your Letterboxd or IMDb, like when you're going through the cast, like this guy is it. This is like kind of the name of this film. Everyone else are just kind of, relatively unknown actors that have been in like indie horror, stuff like that. But yeah, he's fantastic. And, this is kind of interesting. You alluded it before we kicked it to the trailer about, obviously it's a found footage, which you're already kind of going into a disadvantage with me because I've been pretty vocal. I'm not a huge found footage guy. I thought this used it pretty effectively. And for me, I'm a vibes guy. And this is like, you guys always tease me that it's just kind of like, oh, well, all you got to do to please Rowan is just basically like have a VHS aesthetic.
The vibes, man.
The vibes, man. And this is like everything a guy like me could want. Like, you feel like you're watching something right off of like a VHS. It's got that vibe, especially, and once we get into it, like, the third act of this, when things really ramp up, like, they definitely feed anyone with an aesthetic like that would really enjoy, I think, what happens. This has a lot of, like, it reminded me a lot of other kind of indie. The one I really thought about was Beyond the Gates when I was watching this, which had a very similar aesthetic. Not really the same premise, but, 2 guys watching a VHS tape and like horrific things happen, but when they happen, it's almost in this aesthetic of VHS, even though there is the normal camera lens as well. And yeah, I thought this kind of, wore a lot of influences on its sleeve. I like to see the care it taken. I did think, to me, unlike most movies where you're like, in the middle, it kind of, to me, like, I had some issues in the front end of this, more so.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I thought that because of the way the story's told, there's a lot of exposition they need to kind of get out of the way.
Okay, so you didn't really like the mockumentary, like the story so far sort of thing, like the framing, like as if we were almost watching a documentary before the movie starts. Like it goes on for probably like 5 or 6 minutes, I'd say, like setting up the events of the movie and like where this late night show is, basically the ratings kind of on the downturn and, kind of some of the drama and whatnot involved in some of these people's lives. And that stuff didn't really hit for you, or?
Yeah, I don't know if it didn't hit, but I felt like I would have liked it delivered some other way. But at the same time, I'm also willing to recognize I don't know how you would deliver it any other way. But I just was kind of like, I just felt like maybe it took too long to get into what I was there for, what I already knew I was there for.
Yeah, and that's the thing with this sort of title, and with, I haven't seen the trailer, but I know they show horror aspects in the trailer, which, this movie, when you're watching it, it's very much like keeping everything close to the chest for, a good probably 35-40 minutes for sure. Like, obviously there's some, hypnotism, or, there's a medium or something like that, which obviously can be vaguely horror, but nothing really explicitly gets horror until probably the latter half. So for me, like, the first half of this movie, I was pretty much just enjoying the vibes. I was enjoying this as just like a late night television show that I was watching with David Dastmalchian, chewing up the scenery and being like this charismatic host, and kind of just always looking at the corners for like something that's just kind of going awry a little bit, I guess. Yeah. Like I like the documentary setup. They don't really get back to it, I guess, or really pay off that whole conceit at the end of it, which maybe is a little bit more disappointing. But I like, realistically, the only other way I could have seen this is if they like tried to do some like talking heads, or like a news segment discussing like aspects of the show, or maybe they go to another talk show that's talking shit about this show that's like, on the downturn or something like that.
Yeah.
But what they did is probably just like the quickest way probably to just get into the story, I guess. But that stuff didn't bother me too much. But I completely agree with you. David Dastmalchian carries. I do think the rest of the cast is good, though. I never had an issue.
They're
with
fantastic.
Anybody. Hopefully this isn't spoiling anything, but I particularly liked, I think it's Gus, the guy's name. He's kind of like the little,
he was fantastic.
What is it? The
he's
comedic
like
relief, I guess.
The band leader.
Yeah, exactly. He's like the one that essentially the host throws it to whenever he makes a joke. They kind of like verbal spar with each other. He's almost like the yes man. I really liked him. I thought he was great. He sold the role completely. There are other people that I really enjoyed, but maybe I'll just wait just in case I do reveal something. But I very much liked kind of the cast of characters they bring on to this and kind of tease and interrogate the idea of like, are we, is this real what we're seeing on the air? I really enjoyed that. I think it was funny. We skipped past it, obviously. The million production companies that produced this movie. Did you notice how many production companies were involved in the media of this movie? I shit you not. I think they show like 20 different logos for production companies. I almost thought it was part of the joke. I was like, damn, is this movie just gonna like begin with like commercials essentially? Like, this is crazy. Did you notice that? Like how many production logos there were?
I did. Now I guess I figured that would happen. Like I knew a little bit about like how this is Australian and that I think they tried to release this before it kind of got distribution and other companies had bought into it and all this kind of stuff. So I kind of knew that there was a lot of people involved in it, but I too also I was like, I kept thinking, I'm like, is this logo part of it? Is this logo part of it?
Yeah.
Because I thought maybe they would just try to do like this seamless transition where I still think I'm watching just credits or whatever.
Which I think would have been really clever. They don't do that, but I think that would have been pretty great. Yeah, but basically what I was going with is just, I was gripped pretty much the entire time for this movie. I will say for me, weirdly enough, I think the first two sections of the movie were better than the third. I think that probably is just like a testament to our personal like taste in horror, where for me, like the first 2/3 is a lot more slow and a lot more kind of like insular, kind of like what you would just call like creepy things happening before it's explicitly horror, that I really enjoyed. We haven't really talked about it yet, but the set design in this.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's fantastic for basically the majority of it. But this is where we kind of have to address the elephant in the room, I guess, which is the AI discussion. Rowan, I feel like we both don't like AI, right? Like, is that a hot take? Like, how do you feel about it? I guess we've never discussed it.
Yeah, we've never. Listen, I'm all about art. Like, and obviously, to the detriment of this film is like there's definitely been a like canceling campaign for this where people are review bombing it and basically saying, don't see it, don't put your money to this. I mean, in general for AI, I think I'm not against people using AI, especially artists. Like if it's an artist using it for like some sort of mixture or mold, obviously I don't think anything will ever replace like a human, touch, I guess. Like there's always something special about that. But I feel like almost a realist where I'm like, this is just kind of inevitable. Like AI is here. AI isn't going anywhere. And my big issue, especially around this movie, is like, this is like super independent, low budget, like it's a low budget movie. And I just don't know if this is who I'm trying to attack for the use of AI in general. Like, salute to the directors that have like kind of come out, addressed it. I think personally they've been pretty, they've kind of said, yes, we hear that, we recognize that that was kind of shitty of us to do. But at the same time, like, I think it's great. I see lots of artists that have been remaking the images and been like, hey, I could do this for $200.
Yeah.
But as someone that has tried to hire artists for stuff, they usually don't say that when you're trying to hire them. So I feel like, they made it felt on a budget. This is somewhere where we could have saved money and to use elsewhere. Where, like I said, before, Shudder and this got distribution, it was just this independent movie from Australia from two guys that made like two other super low budget horror movies.
Yeah, for me, it's just kind of, I'm against AI for sure. And in the use of art or anything that's going to be like commercial for profit. Like if you're doing your own like little Photoshop stuffs and you're using like additive fill or something to fill like a part of the canvas that you don't have the skills to kind of do, I'm fine with that. If you're not like trying to sell it as a print or something like that, basically what I'm saying is, if I use additive fill when I'm doing the podcast album art for some sort of movie that has only really low res images of it, it's kind of like whatever. Or if you use an AI upscaler to try and like increase the quality because it's so low or something like that, I'm fine with that. We're not selling our podcast album art or something, right? It's literally a means to an end. In a movie like this, I don't care what small budget you are. They had enough money to pay someone $500 to do these scenes. The scene or the set design is like immaculate. It's like perfect for like the 70s vibe that they're going for. If you have enough money to nail that aesthetic, like down to like the lights choices and the boom mics and stuff like that, you have the money to pay an artist a couple $100. Now, do I think an artist would just say like, hey, I would do this for $200, especially when you're like, yo, I'm a producer of this movie that's starring David Dastmalchian? No, you're probably getting quotes that are crazy, like probably like 5 or 10K or something like that, especially when you're talking about having like exclusive rights to use it in perpetuity and all this sort of thing. But still, I just don't think it's that complicated. The issue with me with this also comes down to, I know that they've been straight up and they've addressed that like, hey, we used AI. But I don't think they've been genuine with it.
No?
They said it. No, I don't. And this is the thing. They said that they used AI in 3 images that are still images that when they were discussing it, they were basically saying they're the transition images, right? And like, if you've seen the movie, there are 3 images that they use as transition elements. But if that's the case, I really don't understand why they didn't swap out those images after this happened, because it's pretty easy to swap them all out. I've done video editing. You need the timeline. You can just swap out that JPEG and put your cross fade on it. That's what it is. It's a still image that cross fades. I want them to address the logo for the show in the background that's on the door for like the entire movie, because I think that's AI, and I don't think they've addressed that or explicitly said it was, but that is not an easy fix. And that's the thing where it's like, if it is just those 3 transition images, that's a quick fix. I can literally do it, no joke, a minute in like, if you gave me your like Adobe Premiere timeline, which they probably didn't edit this in. But if it's something that was like integral to the set design, the door that like David Dastmalchian's character Jack literally walks through, I think it's a little bit more troublesome, because that's not like just a decision that they made kind of like spur of the moment, decided to do it. That's something like that had to be printed out, that had to be like plastered on the doors. That's a lot more elaborate job than just like a fly decision of like, yeah, let's just quickly do this. And the reason why I think that image is AI, and I could be completely wrong, I'm not an expert in this category, it's just like the owl looks off, kind of like his face and his eye structures don't look right. He's standing on kind of like buildings, because the name of the show is Night Owls with Jack Delroy, and all the windows in the buildings don't line up correctly. It looks like it's created by someone who hasn't seen a skyscraper that's lit up before. And I just kind of don't really believe that an artist would do that. And when I compare that image with the one that went viral of this kind of like the skeleton, there's a lot of like brush strokes and a lot of kind of like similarities between those 2 images. There's just not a good quality image of that Night Owls logo that's used on the door yet. And I have a feeling like it's not going to wind up looking too good for them when it does come out. But, before we started recording, you said you were listening to an interview with these guys concerning this, right?
So, I got a chance to listen to these guys talk, and I'll have to, in another episode, I can't remember what it was. It was around, I just kind of looked it up and was listening to them talk. Now, I know, at their explanation also was kind of that, when they did this, this was before this movie was finished, before, the big strike. And basically, they were talking about that even though they were still admitting the fault of it, but it was basically that to them, like in their circles, like they just said AI wasn't a conversation that was had like it was once the strike came. And that it was basically them, I forget, they did say, and I'm not good at this stuff, I'm not an artist, guys, they said what program it was or whatever it was they used.
Mid-journey,
and basically
probably. Yeah.
Basically, they just said they were excited to like use it and try it out and stuff like that. And I just think they didn't really think about the consequences of it. And, especially then with, all the conversations that happened with the strike, the SAG strike and everything else. And I agree with you. Like, I think 100% if they can switch the transitions, even for, I would suspect this is going to get like a physical media release just for how much hype and praise, even with everyone kind of downvoting. Like, this is still like high Rotten Tomatoes rating. Like, critics seem to really be liking this.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if they can switch it out for that. I don't know the inner workings of that stuff, so I don't know how hard it is. Like, is this already in a distributor's hands where you can't really do anything anymore? Or
yeah, like if they have a physical media release planned and the discs are already printed, which I don't think they would be with a movie of this size, like, yeah, then you can't swap it, obviously. But if we're talking about a digital file, which nowadays that's all what theaters get, that's all that Shudder's gonna get, I'm telling you right now, like literally the time it takes to swap out a combined 6 JPEGs, because they reuse each one twice and put a crossfade filter on it. It's literally like I could do it in a minute if you gave me the timeline, and it wasn't like a complete mess of a timeline. Obviously, that's kind of boiling it down a little bit, just because you gotta account for like exporting, you gotta account for someone to watch it and make sure there's no other issues in the export. You gotta account for probably like there must be some like sort of resubmission costs or something. I'm not saying it wouldn't cost any money. I just don't think the amount of effort it would take is very much to save a lot of, basically win back a lot of good graces. Like, yes, I'm 100% with you. I don't think you should boycott this film because they used 3 AI images, or 4, like I think they might have used. And I do think they could have even argued, like, hey, there is like almost like a surreal aspect or an uncanny aspect to this movie that AI could have even helped out and, made it feel a little bit stranger. But the ways at which they're used in the movie, I don't think they're really contributing to that either. I think they very much are used for interstitials, transitions, almost like we got to go to break and we throw up the AI image or something. Mm-hmm. It's just something that to me that I think it kind of sucks overall. Like, I wish the movie didn't have it. If there wasn't a huge talking point around it, I don't think I would have noticed it, to tell you the truth. My eye isn't tuned to that. I've messed around with the AI creation, like Mid-Journey and stuff, but it's literally like, oh, what does Rowan look like as an alien or something? You feed a picture of Rowan or something, like it's just literally like as joke amongst friends, or like in Photoshop to, as generative fill or something like that. So it's just, we're not really in the same league here. And I understand they did this probably in like 2021, but these conversations did exist back then as well. It's not purely because of the actor strike. Like, artists that have been making a living on like commissions and stuff have been talking about this shit ever since it first came out. So at a certain point, it's like, sure, maybe I'm a little bit more terminally online than some of these people. But I would also say, considering the sort of movie you're making, I feel like they probably knew a little bit about technology, or, like, they're nerds. The people that made this movie, there's no way they're not nerds. They know a little bit about it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And that's why I think, like, you should be able to me, I think the movie should be criticized for it. Just, to me, I don't think boycotting it or review bombing it, because guess what, people, all your I'm sure all your favorites, all your Marvels and all that stuff, I bet there's AI out the asshole in that stuff. And, they're just smart enough that they won't say there is. So,
well, yeah, we won't start outing everything, but I know like Secret Invasion, I think we're using
that was
AI
a big thing.
for like the opening credits. And I know True Detective Night Country just got caught with like AI, like posters and stuff that they said was intentional, but who knows? So that's the thing. It's like, this is going to be a talking point that we're going to continue to have. Hopefully it stays out of our indie horror lane. Hopefully like Ari Aster isn't there in his next horror movie, with a shitload of AI, unless, it's supposed to be Uncanny Valley and, very distracting, It wasn't in this movie. It is tastefully done. It's manipulated with humans afterwards or given like their own font treatments and stuff. It's just a bit of a bummer. That's basically where I'll stand. Do not review bomb the movie. Do not boycott the movie either. That's silly as well, especially when we're talking about a little indie horror flick. Just hopefully, the next time these writer directors make the next movie, they're not going to employ AI in here. And it's such a shame because the rest of the set design is superb, as we've said. It's absolutely excellent. It's probably one of the higher points of the movie for me. A lot of the cameras, the way they're framed and whatnot, really accentuates it. It really like fits the actors' faces really well, like all the different colors and stuff, like kind of like these horizontal different colored like beams coming across through, like swooping from one shot to the next. It all looks really good. I think it's some great set design. It very much sells it. It reminds me of like something like Joker, which I know a lot of people cringe at, but like they had it like a great late night set as well, and they probably had like 100 times the budget, if not more than that, 1,000 times the budget, right? And still it looked very I don't know, if it looked right to me. Kind of still in the spoiler-free section, the late-night format. You mentioned that you're not a big fan of mockumentary or found footage style, and that's the sort of the thing with this movie. I think it kind of half commits to it. Right off the bat, it says, like, what you're about to see is a mixture of, the master tape, recovered and also behind the scenes footage. And it's like, oh, so they're going to use like basically traditional movie making to do all the behind the scenes stuff. And I was a little bit let down by that. I felt like when they were filming the actual late night segments, it was like probably about 80% there that it felt like a late night show. Like obviously every now and then they'd cut to a shot that's like an extreme close up or a weird angle that you wouldn't have the natural coverage for. But the behind the scenes stuff, like where they'd follow the actors like in between the commercial breaks and stuff, they just felt very like modern, I guess, to me. Like obviously they were black and white, but they would do like shot reverse shot, or like it didn't seem like people were like sneakily recording these conversations, which is what the movie is trying to propose, that it's just like, someone was here recording this and they're saying things that they shouldn't be talking about. And that was like the one moment to me is like, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed what was being said, or like, that was, kind of like what they were revealing, but I didn't like the way it was being done. I would have preferred if it was actually like a camera that was left rolling in the corner of this, back hall or something, or cameraman had to go and wash his hands or had to go to the bathroom, so he laid his camera down and it kept rolling or something silly, like just basically a little bit more like avant-garde like camera angles or something to do this that actually would like sell that this was like found footage. This is very much like this is edited out the ass. There's no way like anyone would ever find this behind the scenes footage the way it's basically set up for us. Did any of that bother you, or were you kind of happy with it because you're not a big found footage guy?
I mean, to me it did kind of take you out of it. I would have much preferred it being just like fully done in like a TV, like I'm watching TV format of this late night show. I would have liked even commercials and shit. I would have been fine with that. Like completely like, I think there's been stuff like, there's been a couple horror movies that have used a TV premise where they show like fake commercials and things like that. And I think that would have been really effective in this. Or like you said, even if these guys have microphones on them or microphones around them, and even if I'm
hot mic,
hot mic, and I wouldn't even care if I'm not barely seeing these guys. They're way in the background, but I can hear them talking through a microphone, and then I'm still getting the story, but I'm still like, okay, I'm literally in the perspective of this camera and this master tape, as they say.
Yeah, and that would have fit with it perfectly as well, because the show is experienced audio issues and lighting issues and whatever you would expect, technological issues throughout this recording, that it could definitely make sense that like, oh, the camera guy abandoned the camera here, or like someone was running around to try and get the mic off of Jack, but he just left in a hurry to go and have a conversation out back or something. It definitely could have worked, and I just kind of wish that they were a little bit more experimental with that. Kind of, that's kind of my last point, I guess, is just I was gripped the entire time. I thought it was great, basically the movie when I was watching it. It was just more so the third act, they definitely get a little bit stranger, I guess, overall. Like, I don't want to get into it, but it was just, the movie feels a lot bigger by the third act is what I'll say, compared to what I was watching in the first 2/3. And some of that stuff didn't fully work for me. It's the sort of thing where it's like, I almost wanted a smaller ending. So we'll get in there in the spoiler discussion, but that was like another just little negative for me, I guess, overall. That I was like thoroughly enjoyed the first 2 sections. I liked some of where they were going in the third act. I just didn't like how it was executed, I guess. So yeah, would you recommend this?
Yeah, so this is going to be weird. I do have a recommend for this. I highly recommend this, but
yeah,
I don't know. I may have preferred to see this on my television, as they're trying to present you a late night television show that you would watch on your TV set.
Yeah.
Do I think that's everyone's experience? Probably not. A lot of reviewers I've heard talk about this are saying you got to see it in the theater. I think probably the biggest difference is it seems that everyone I've heard say that saw this in a packed crowd and, was like a sold out showing. Everyone's having a time. Where my theater was me and 2 other guys and it was just an empty theater. And I kept thinking, I was just like, one of the good things that I do credit found footage is usually it's awesome to watch on your television because that's how they're expecting people to watch it. And I think this would add something to it being on your television and not on a massive, 100-foot screen. Like, I think you definitely won't be totally missing anything not going to see this in the theater, which doesn't really matter because this comes out, like you said, in like 2 weeks on Shudder. Yeah. So you'll be able to see it at home. What about you?
Oh yeah, this is definitely getting a recommend from me as well. God, what should I say? My theater was kind of full. There was probably more people in this than in Godzilla, X Kong, The New Empire, which I watched like an hour or 2 after seeing this. Weirdly, a lot of older women in this movie, just kind of by themselves. I don't know if like the Late Night with the Devil was like, particularly interesting to like religious old women or something, but like there's aspects in this movie where I was like, they're not like squeamish and they're not like rushing out of like some of this, darker stuff. But it was just very strange, like the people that went to see this movie. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this. I want to see more movies like this. I kind of want to see the conceit that's like in this movie applied to like a televangelist or something. I would love to see that. I would like to see, I don't know, there probably is like podcast versions of it and whatnot, I basically like Host a couple years ago. Like I want to see this sort of style applied to like a web series or, a podcast, or I know there's been a couple that have done the live streaming space, but it's just like, I like this mockumentary found footage style. I think specifically what they do here is pretty impressive. So yeah, it's definitely a recommend from me. I'm kind of with you. I don't know if you need to rush out the theaters to see it. I enjoyed it definitely, being completely engrossed in the theater, but I basically enjoy everything better in the theater because I know I'm not going to be on my phone, but I do definitely get, the talking points of saying like, hey, maybe this would be just fine on like a CRT TV as well, because that's what they were going for. So yeah, that's a recommendation from both of us. And with that, I think that's time to cut to our spoiler discussion for Late Night with the Devil. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Late Night with the Devil, so if you've not seen Late Night with the Devil, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, what should we start with in the spoiler-filled discussion? We basically said nothing about the horror elements of this movie.
Yeah, no. I mean, I feel like as I said, I was listening to interviews on my way home and stuff. So it's definitely this has made me interested in reading, because I guess they base this off a lot of like actual stuff. Apparently there was like a big book in the 70s, not Amityville Horror, about like pretty much the same thing, like a girl that they claimed was like possessed, and they took her around on talk shows. I feel like her name was Molly something.
Okay.
But I thought it was kind of cool that I didn't know when watching it, but after hearing people talk about it, that it was like, oh, this is kind of cool because it's like related to these instances of maybe not the actual devil just murdering everybody, but like a fake scenario that someone tried to scam the general audiences with this. And I was just like, things like that always just, tickle my fancy about this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this sort of premise, like, I can 100% see this actually happening, where there's different late night hosts kind of sparring for the top spot. Some of them, like, probably more legitimate than others. Like, this one here with Jack Delroy, it winds up almost being like Jerry Springer at a certain point. Like, after the death of his wife and his career is kind of falling apart, he's basically grabbing onto any little, like, scraps of fame and relevancy he can find. And, like, just some of the stuff is just very much, like, straight out of Jerry Springer. So, yeah, like, bringing on a medium and, planting the two people that he's gonna, consort with in the front row. And, he had someone question them in the lobby. So you got all the information to pass on to the medium is like, yeah, 100% something like that would probably happen, or like the hypnotism stuff, or, the psychics and all that stuff. Like, yeah, I'm a natural skeptic. So when I see all this, it's like, yeah, of course people would be doing this. Do I know if there was like a live possession on TV that people watched? I have no idea about that, but I could definitely see like the Warrens and stuff made a very lucrative career out of it, right? Like,
100%.
Most people like pretty much say now that it's like, oh, well, sure, there might have been a couple of legitimate cases, sure, that you may have seen covered in The Conjuring 1 and 2, but by and large, I think most people believe they're snake oil salesmen, right? So that's the thing where it was like, when I was watching this, a lot of it felt very capitalistic, but also I very much liked how horror kind of merged with that world that they were creating. Yeah, and kind of like one of the more interesting aspects of the movie, as I guess, is just like Jack's Faustian bargain he made. Essentially that it's like, obviously it's like it's the ultimate revelation, I guess, but like we get like the Bohemian Grove set up like early in the movie. I think it's even like maybe the opening of the movie, like where they're detailing like, the rise and fall, and about how he was in with important people and the, people that went to the Grove and, stuff like that. That I was like, oh, okay, he definitely made like a literal deal with the devil to become number one on late night television, no matter what it takes. And I very much liked kind of going into the movie with that in my mind, and just seeing like how they were kind of teasing it out. They leave it literally right till the very end, but it was the sort of thing where it kind of kept me on my toes, I guess, for a lot of the movie.
Yeah, well, I was kind of interested because I didn't know whether or not they were going to bring in this group more so. I mean, they really didn't end up bringing them in, but I was curious, like, did it bug you at all? Because I kept thinking, like, throughout the film, Jack is kind of, like, bewildered the entire time that, like, anything is going wrong, that, like, he doesn't really know what's going on, it seems. Even in, like, the wild twists and turns of the third, like, he just, like, you can see him start to realize, but I'm thinking, like, well, you obviously did make this deal with the devil, so you should, like, obviously be like, okay, well, I made this deal with the devil, but, like, that doesn't come into his mind at all when any of these things are going on.
I think when you're in, like, a cult or, like, any sort of religious thing, like, like, obviously he was probably there with really important, famous people that basically said, like, hey, you make this sort of deal with us, like, you're gonna go places, kid, sort of thing, where there might be some human sacrifice or something involved, but who knows, maybe not at the meeting he was at, right?
No.
Where it's just like, where it just winds up being like, yeah, you join a cult, essentially, and they say they'll help your career, and you don't realize that you made this sort of implicit deal, right? Like, I don't think when the death of his wife happened, he kind of interpreted it as, like, this was the sacrifice I made. Like, in order for me to be number one, she has to die. Because obviously they kind of detail his downward spiral and about how, like, the show just goes completely off the rails into shit, essentially, after her death. So I feel like if he was, like, so motivated purely by this deal, it would have been the sort of thing where it would have just upticked instantly, or he would have been completely in on it, where I kind of read into it that it was just like, yeah, he had certain bits planned, obviously, to, elevate the show. Like, you hear him in the beginning of the show kind of talking about the restraints backstage, and someone's like, why do we need those? And it's kind of like, they don't know that, like, an exorcism or essentially a possession is happening in the third act of this movie, but it's a bit that he has planned.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is planned out, like, obviously, like, the medium and whatnot, but I think it just goes off the rails. And, maybe it's just like so frightening or like not what he had planned that it's just like he doesn't remember the weird deal he made in the, the forest 9 months ago where, some people in owl masks or whatever, It's just the sort of thing like, yeah, you're part of a cult. You probably don't realize exactly like what you sold your soul to, I guess.
Do you think Shudder just has a warehouse that those owl masks are sitting in? Because when I was looking at them, I'm like, I'm pretty sure these are the same owl masks from A Wounded Fawn, like the exact same ones.
See, I kind of feel like a bit of a, I don't know, like I basically made a short film a few years ago that it also has a big owl mask in it. Now, in my short film, it's literally like a monstrous, like actual creature owl that like, I made the big mask and, I was trying to pass it off as an actual creature at the time without any like VFX or any know-how to do it. So I never released it because I wasn't happy with it. But it's just funny nowadays. I see like all these masks that are like very similar to kind of like the clay mold that I did, where I'm like, damn, I have the know-how to do this. Like, it looks pretty good before you put a bunch of feathers all over it or whatnot. Like, obviously, there is a feathered one in this movie that looks pretty good as well. But it was just, whenever I see the owl masks, I'm just taken out. And I just, I think back on my my failures as a fledgling,
you're like, I could have made this
indie
movie.
filmmaker. I definitely don't think that. But I think, like, I could probably write aspects of this movie. Like, it's the sort of thing where it's like, there's lots of good stuff in here that, I've definitely had similar thoughts at times.
I just want to have a conversation with Carmichael because this was my only other real issue with it. I loved Carmichael as a character. I thought he was like funny when he needed to be funny.
The skeptic, yeah.
The skeptic that's like super sleazy and scammy, who I also didn't know is based off James something, but apparently exact same thing, but real life. A magician that then turned into a skeptic and made a career out of.
Yeah, I think that's the Honest Liar guy.
Yeah,
I don't
is.
remember. Okay. So I've watched that documentary, and he kind of, he started out with magicians, but then eventually went to evangelical churches.
Yeah.
And would basically, reveal how they would answer the prayers or, whatnot.
Like, I won't say I didn't enjoy it. I did enjoy the twist. Obviously, we get in the third where, we basically find out this guy is like a follower of this deity, and at the end he knows what to say, the worship, even though it doesn't end very well for him.
Oh, did I miss that?
Yeah, you must have, because he has the necklace and everything, and like his necklace is like a satanic necklace.
Dude, I completely missed this. All I know him as is like the skeptic and like a hypnotist at one point of the movie.
Yeah, no. Well, and this is kind of my issue with it, because obviously I got it from the movie, and then like I said, I did listen to some things about it, and that is what ended up being was what I thought it was, but I just didn't think they played it right, because I kept thinking to myself, like, I think if you blink, you will miss the fact that this guy also secretly worships this deity. Like, he knows about this deity, like, at the end, that's why, like, I forget his whole blurb before, he gets, has a hot time there and gets melted. He basically, is like, oh, I like give up my life to you. That's when he pulls out the necklace and stuff. And so, but I was just like, I feel like they could have played this a little stronger.
Oh, I missed that. It like, I know when he was melting and stuff, but I think I just assumed he was possessed or something, I guess. But
this was my only issue with them, is I was like, I wish there was a couple more winks throughout it to the camera where you're like, wait a second, like maybe there is something a little more than just a skeptic in Carmichael. And I just think that point would have hit home more.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I think it's winks the opposite way. Because in particular, like when Lily is possessed and they're kind of like putting on the show for the audience, Carmichael's in the background and he looks horrified the entire time when the voice is coming out of Lily. But then obviously when they cut back to him, it's like his rational side of his mind is taken over again, where he's essentially like, oh, this is how you did it all, let's go sit in the seats and I'll show you about like, the power of persuasion and whatnot.
Like I said, I just think it was sloppily held, obviously,
Yeah.
Like I said,
I didn't get that that at all. I missed that.
You didn't get
beat.
that. I barely got that beat. I was like, oh, wait a second. Okay. This is why he knows, like, what to say, I guess, because he says some weird ass things to it quickly and holds up the necklace to it and, you know, says the thing about pledging his life to him. And
dude, you're like speaking a different language compared to what I saw. I literally don't remember that little beat other than him melting. So I feel like I was hypnotized to some degree, which is wild.
I think they did give the one other hint where, you know, there's a couple times there where he's like, oh, hey, can you get me in on this cult, this group? Which then, once that ending came, I was like, okay, this makes sense because this group, just like the cult that, Lilith is part of, obviously worship the same thing. Like, it's the devil, it's the same being.
Yeah, I think they say Abraxas.
Abraxas. Yeah. And is also, like, Carmichael knows all about Abraxas, and he's like, oh, this is why the name is like this, and why he wants to be part of this, like, secret organization that doesn't only make you famous, but I assumed he knew also worships Abraxas.
Yeah, see, for me, like, once again, the way I was reading that was just like, oh yeah, this guy's the shyster. He's like, you know, he's always trying to get ahead, trying to make money. You know, he's the sort of guy that thinks he's the smartest guy in every single room he walks into, right? So it's just the sort of thing where it's like, of course he wants to be part of a secret society that gives him even more money and more power and more influence, right? So yeah, it was just, I don't know. I guess I missed that subplot. It didn't really, you know, deter me from the rest of the movie. It wasn't to the movie's detriment or anything. But yeah, I missed that beat. I'm completely shocked.
I said Lilith. It's Lily, not Lilith.
Yeah, but I mean, that you're going for Lilith when you call a little girl Lily in this movie as the sole survivor of a satanic cult, essentially, that all burned themselves, you know? We danced around the hypnotism beat. I think that's the first beat where the movie really strays into kind of like horror territory. Like, it does kind of something interesting where basically it's addressing us, the audience, but also the audience in the movie. And it kind of repeats itself where it shows one version where essentially Jack's lackey, I forget his name, it's like Gus or something.
Yep.
Yeah, Gus, okay.
Gus.
He has a phobia of worms, and he believes there's worms inside of him, and there's kind of like this moment of body horror where he pulls worms out of his neck, and then he winds up, you know, pulling a mass of them out of his stomach and stuff, and then one like bursts out of his eyes and stuff. Like, what do you think about that moment? Did you enjoy that stuff?
I loved it. I was like, this is what I want to see. And not only did I love it just because of that, but this is also my first Shudder movie in the theater. And this is what I want in the theater, Shudder. I want to see this giant ass worm like busting out of this guy's head. The guy's head just like breaking off, and it's just like gross and awesome. And like even the two guys sitting behind me, you could tell we're just like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
oh yeah,
this is what we came for.
Yeah, it turns a corner and goes into like a completely different territory where at that moment I was like, okay, I'm kind of into this because it's just so crazy and over the top. And then I was like, okay, and they do the revelation where it's like, obviously we were all hypnotized and that didn't actually happen. You know, the guy was just pantomiming that there was worms and stuff. And I was like, okay, I like this little, like, it's playing with basically our perception of the movie. Like, we can't really believe the footage we're seeing now because it's possible that we could be hypnotized. Obviously it gets a little bit more into that right at the very end of the movie, but I was fine with that beat. I think where the movie started losing me a little bit more was where, like, how much, like, VFX lightning there winds up being, or, like, I don't know, when Abraxas, like, splits open Lily's head and it's like this being, like, shooting lights and stuff out of it.
You loved it. I loved it so much. I loved it. I could have just lived in it for the rest of my life. Oh my god. Take me, Abraxas.
For me, it just looked like shit. That was the thing. It's like, I like it conceptually. I like how much it's distorting the image and, like, blowing everything out and, like, making the movie look like shit. But the actual effect, like the practical effect with the visual effects, all that stuff, it just looked really bad to me.
I want it to look that bad. That's how I wanted it to look. I was like, this is awesome. This is just awesome.
It's just if we were watching an actual master of where, like, a demon appeared on the master, like, we would never believe that was real in a million years. That's the thing. Well, like, that's kind of where, like, once again, the mockumentary style, this kind of ruins itself in a way, because it's like, if it was a really good effect or it was, like, not shown as well, I could believe that this was, like, oh, they've retrieved this tape from the 70s. Obviously David Dastmalchian starring in it, so that ruins it right away. But it's like that's where they kind of betray its premise a little bit. Similarly, for me, the frame by frame section, where I noticed a couple times throughout the movie that there was, something slipped into the frame rate. Like, I was like, oh, I saw something there when the person turns their head, where sometimes they reveal it, but other times I thought I saw something, they never addressed it. So this is the sort of movie where I feel like people could probably pause it and kind of tease apart the footage, and they'll probably find like, oh, there was a hidden face there, only a couple times throughout the movie, but I feel like it's in there. There's a kind of a scare that relies on this, manipulation of scrubbing back and forth in the footage to reveal what's there, and it winds up being revealed that it was like the ghost of his wife was there in the footage. Once again, it's just like, it looked like garbage. It looks so bad.
I liked it so much.
Oh, man. All right, so this is the thing for me then. Like, basically in the third act, all of the visual effects I thought weren't executed well enough to actually be scary, obviously, but also they weren't executed well enough to make me believe that they were part of like the mockumentary style. Like, I wouldn't believe anything that happened here is real, other than possibly the final shot. The final shot where it's kind of pulling away and you kind of see the chaos of like where the set and everything's destroyed, and you see like the aftermath of everybody, and it kind of looks a little bit more practical. I was like, okay, possibly, really grainy footage 4:3, maybe you'd believe that something happened at a movie studio. But for the last like 10 or 15 minutes, I was completely like, oh, this is like too far. It's too much.
I mean, I knew when I knew when it was playing, I was like, oh, Colton's gonna hate this.
Yeah,
I knew in my soul. It's everything I wanted. To me, it was just like, it was camp heaven. I was like, it looks terrible. Yeah. I don't even care that it doesn't look in the world of the movie. I was like, the lightning effects look ridiculous. Oh, so like bad. All the electricity.
The theremin shooting electricity and stuff too earlier in the movie. Oh, so bad.
So good. And like I said, when Lily's head splits apart and it's just like this beam of light, like I'm in a goddamn Ghostbusters movie. Yeah. I loved it. And like I said, this is where I was like, Beyond the Gates. Looks like Beyond the Gates, and I fucking love that movie. So I was like, yeah, this is what I want.
Yeah, I think I kind of just wanted the movie to be a little bit more reserved or a little bit smaller. I liked kind of like leaning into the surreal aspect of it, of like, can you believe what you're watching in your television screen? The idea of him completing his show, but then also being trapped in a hell of like perpetual shows and stuff like that. Like, I liked that conceptually, and I also like just kind of putting like the spinning hypnotism wheel up to the frame at one point, like in the third act when things are starting to get crazy, that you can almost say like, oh, you're being hypnotized, that you're seeing all this stuff. That I really liked a lot of that, even though I think like a lot of the footage they were showing you wasn't that interesting. It was just kind of like repeats of what we've already seen throughout the movie, but like conceptually as an idea, I like that. I wish they would have done something a little bit more interesting with that, I guess. And the ultimate reveal that like he is basically in this alternate reality, killing his wife basically to get ahead, basically with like the sacrificial dagger or whatnot, just like this metaphorical, like I killed her to get to where I am, to be the top of this late night show, to become infamous. And, kind of like the hard cut to him stabbing Lily, like as the last one that he killed with his bare hands, I thought was a really good little, twist of the knife, quite literally, but also, in the movie as well, that I was like, oh, this is good. I enjoyed the last beat.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the last 30 seconds of the movie. Just some of the previous 20. I was just like, God, what am I watching? How did we get here? Was kind of my thought. How did we get here?
It ended with like a little banger song too. I don't know what the song was, but I was like, oh, that's a little ditty.
Oh, really? We're going to have to search it up, see if it's original or if it's like actually.
I feel like it's licensed. It seemed like it was a licensed song.
Cool.
I guess I shouldn't say ditty. That's a bad word now. So
yeah, let's leave the ditty talk off this podcast for sure. But with that, is there anything else you want to discuss before we rate this?
I'm good to go and rate it.
All right, this is a little bit of a longer one by the looks of things, but if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, What would you give Late Night with the Devil?
I'm gonna give this a comfortable yay. I really enjoyed my time with this. I think this is one of the few times that this kind of lived up to the hype for me, what everyone was saying. You know, there was a few things that I had issues with that I can't give it a slay because of that. But this is one that I think could become like a yearly watch, like definitely a Halloween watch. It's set up to be a Halloween special on television in the movie. So like I can definitely see me throwing this on every Halloween just to get in the vibes before the trick-or-treaters come. And I just think it's a good time. Like, it was interesting enough. And, you know, if you're found footage and I like it, it's probably, I don't know, at least pretty good because I don't normally like this kind of style of horror film. And just everything about it was unique enough. The aesthetic was great. Yeah, I just thought this was overall just like a great effort. I'm very interested, you know, all the issues we talked about with the directors. I'm just very interested to see what they do next. Like, I'm definitely interested in whatever their next project is to see what they do. Because, like, I haven't seen anything else they've done, but I've looked, you know, at the stills and stuff, and it doesn't really seem like this is anything like they've done before. They do horror stuff, but I think nothing with this kind of aesthetic or feel. So, yeah, I'm just interested to see what they do next, and, yeah, yay from me. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, before I get into the immediate thoughts or my, you know, score, have you seen the WNUF Halloween special?
So I haven't. I know that's like blasphemy in horror circles because everybody loves it. And I actually have it on my list this year to watch on Halloween.
Okay, that's just when you mentioned this should be a Halloween watch. I agree, but probably also that as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, I just felt like there were some listeners screaming at the podcast, basically being like, you guys are going to get through this whole review and not mention this movie? So, yes, that and Ghost Watch, you know, of course, are the two big, I would say, references to this. But, yeah, I also haven't seen anything else that these directors have done. By the looks of it, I think this is very much the most professional-looking movie, although there is a positive review for one of their movies called Scare Campaign from a friend of the show, Kyle Ferguson. I know he's big in, like, the, you know, every horror movie on Netflix, Discord and whatnot, and he seemed to enjoy that, so maybe I'll check that out. But yeah, this is also a big yay from me. I very much enjoyed this movie. As I said, my issues with it are mostly due to the third act being a little bit too messy or over the top for me, and kind of like I didn't like stylistically how they handled or strayed outside of kind of like their late night format conceit with the behind the scenes stuff and whatnot. Other than that, I pretty much loved everything this does. It has great set design outside of the AI bullshit, of course. I was gripped the entire time as like either a documentary or a mockumentary or a found footage horror movie or just literally like an analog horror movie. I loved everything what it was doing. Basically the entire time I was like, damn, I need to write one of these or I need to like seek out more of these because I very much enjoyed it. Of course, David Dastmalchian like carries the thing completely. I want to see him be more of like a, you know, a leading man or at least get some, you know, more prestigious roles because the dude just like he understands the assignment and he like nails it. Like the fact that he's like not like a weird little guy in this movie but a super charismatic host that like probably ladies fawn over and whatnot is like awesome. He completely like embodies and understands what he needs to do, and I just thought he completely nailed it. So I very much enjoyed that. So yeah, it's just a great horror movie to me. I very much enjoyed it. You know, I want to see more of what these directors do next, and I also just want to see more movies in this style. Yeah. Big fan of Late Night with the Devil here. And if you made it this far in the show and you're not following us already on our socials, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, / or Letterboxd threads, Bluesky. If there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Stephen, Joy, Carvey, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and Genesis, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early. Be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, you mentioned a song at the end of this movie.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into it.
Gonna have to look into it, add it to the playlist.
That's right. But yeah, go over to Spotify to the It Slays Podcast horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned, go into the bio, click the Linktree link. It'll take you directly there. We upload licensed music or scores from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So yeah, go follow the playlist and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, it isn't Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2, but looks like we're going to be covering The First Omen.
Oh.
And I know we both got our tickets for this later in the week, so it's probably another late night recording like we're here right now. But yeah, we'll be checking out that later this week, and probably that'll be in your podcast feeds by the weekend, I would say. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.